Hey everybody, it's Friendo here. I was not able to watch the Bill Nye Ken Ham debate as it was going on, but I found a link and watched it uh, just a little bit ago. And this is a debate that I wasn't exactly excited about, but I was anticipating this. I think there was a lot of absolutely unfounded negativity, um, primarily from people on the science or atheist position, right? People who don't like the Creation Museum, which is the position that I'm in, right? As an atheist, and as someone who's scientifically literate. But this was not at all the shit show that people were anticipating. Um, I thought that the Creation Museum put on a real clean debate, and I was pretty happy with the format and the way it went down. The biggest thing is that Ken Ham did not do what Ray Comfort or Cy Ten Bruggencate often does of turning it into personal conversion. There wasn't a point at which he was berating Bill Nye for not being saved. He did make the argument, which is honest to his belief, that of course I can understand my position doesn't make sense to you because you don't have my faith. If you did, then my position would make sense. And I think Bill Nye answers that quite well, right? Because the response to that is your belief, your faith is really not at question here. My belief, my faith is really not at question either. Absolutely everything that science produces can be or should be compatible with someone's faith. The questions of metaphysics, of meaning, of purpose, of religion and so forth, they're just not a part of the scientific process. All that science is demonstrating to us is what actually can be demonstrated, and arguing against the value of the scientific method and the body of knowledge that it produces is simply to be arguing against what we can actually observe. And so my hat's off to Bill Nye for just meticulously sticking to the point. I was fearful that there would be some of those red herrings, getting off on the question of personal belief, personal incredulity, and for to his credit, Bill Nye did not engage in any kind of personal attack. Right? It wasn't quite as personally satisfying watching the debate, seeing that there really weren't any Christopher Hitchens moments. But that's not really what I expected out of Bill Nye either. So looking at his debating from a technical standpoint, I thought he did a really good job. He kept bringing Ken Ham back to the points that he had made. So for Ken Ham's part, I think that the best point or the best argument that he made was that you can absolutely be a creationist, believe in a young Earth, and still be a scientist and still produce things that are of value from an engineering and a scientific point of view. Right, because in that sense, that's probably the weakest part of Bill Nye's case, in saying that if you are a creationist, if you believe in a young Earth, then it lowers your scientific literacy. And so the direct response to that is, well, here are people who have produced useful scientific advances who also believe this thing. But on the other hand, I don't think that that is at all incompatible with the position that Bill Nye has taken. Clearly you can believe these things and still produce valid scientific discourse. But you will perforce be operating outside of the realm of the things that you believe. Your actual potential as a scientist is limited if you cannot accept validated scientific reality. And so in that regard, I think he absolutely proved his premise. There were two statements that Ken Ham made that I think cost him the debate, just objectively. The first was toward the beginning. He said, "Scientists arbitrarily rule out the supernatural," and that's true. I don't know that it's arbitrary. It's that science is a process based on observation, formulating testable hypotheses, and then verifying them or disproving them. And you have to rule out the supernatural, or you're not testing anything. You're only testing what it is you're observing. Your data set is observation. So it's not that the supernatural is arbitrarily ruled out. It's that there is no other way to run this process. If you bring the supernatural into it, then what you're doing is not science, which is the position we've always had in regards to creationism and the Creation Museum and Answers in Genesis. What it is rationalization, but it is not science. It doesn't predict, it rationalizes. The other moment just specifically was closer to the end when he said, you cannot know the age of the earth through observation scientifically. He said you can't prove that it's young, you can't prove that it's old. And I consider that to be a complete forfeit from his perspective, because he has been arguing that everything the Creation Museum does is science. By misappropriating the term, by changing the definition of science. But when he stated in the debate, you cannot know the age of the earth, whereas Bill Nye in his presentation gave absolute concrete examples of how we date not just the earth, but the universe around us. He provided epistemological proofs. This is how we know what we know. And all that Ken Ham could do is argue for ignorance. Ironically, the opposite of the Seitan Bruggencate position. And so I would say that that statement, those two statements, arbitrarily ruling out the supernatural and not being able to know the date of the earth, those two things represent a forfeit on his part. But I was actually happy with the debate, with how it ran. I could tell that the two of them had established a good rapport leading up to the event, and I think it shone through with their performance. This is the kind of debate that I would like to see more of between the two communities. I absolutely disagree with Richard Dawkins in stating that scientists should not debate creationists. In terms of science itself, it should go through the process of peer review as it does. It should not be open to debate. It should not be open to questions of personal incredulity and feeling. But in terms of popularizing science, in terms of explaining it to the masses, to people who are not necessarily scientifically literate or who are not as literate as they think they are, I think there definitely is a place for this kind of interaction. I think it's one of the best ways. Bill Nye was able to go into an institution whose entire reason for existence is to insulate people from scientific truths that they find harsh, that they find hard to deal with. They invited him in. He was there giving information that otherwise they might not ever have heard, planting seeds of doubt, but more importantly, exposing them to information. So some of the claims that he made, some of the information that he presented, there were people who were there who otherwise would not have known these things, who now have gone out and they will look into it more. Of course, you can never really tell if you're going to address, change someone's mind or address their feelings or their beliefs. But I think you don't have to make that your point. You don't have to make that your purpose. But you can definitely cut down on the distrust. You can definitely cut down on the animosity. More than anything else, he was able to demonstrate to people in the Creation Museum that you can have a respectful, well thought out dialogue. And that those of us who argue for evolution are not doing it out of some hatred of religion or some fear of salvation. We're simply doing it out of our dedication to intellectual curiosity. And so for forcefully and respectfully arguing for that position, my hat is off to Bill Nye.